Good day everyone and welcome to this video, which is on how to deal with Nightblades in ESO PVP. I want to do this with some gameplay over which I give some tips on what tactics I usually think of, on what I watch out for, what the strengths and weaknesses of Nightblades are, and how you can deal with them. Nightblade is one of the strongest classes in the game right now, together with Dragon Knight and maybe Arcanist, as long as the dot proc meta lasts. So it does not have that many weaknesses and it can be very tough to fight. It's also a very common class. It's a class that has a strong allure to many players, so you see a lot of both good Nightblades and bad Nightblades in PvP, and that makes them something you see frequently in PvP in general, and definitely also in White Strake's Mayhem, which should be coming up soon as of the making of this video. I want to show how they work, what they do and how they think, and I also want to show how to counter them with some clips as showcase. This advice is mostly from a Mastersorc point of view, since that's what I main, but I use these tips for any class that I play, so it should be applicable for anybody watching this video as well, and what the Nightblade does doesn't change that much either. The tips should be useful both when fighting gankers and roller Nightblades, so classic standblades if you will, as well as brawlers, which is the strongest Nightblade setup. So starting off, when it comes to the Nightblade offense, also for your own defense, how to deal with that. Basically, Nightblade has not that much pressure, but has a high amount of burst. I'm talking about melee Nightblades specifically here, not about snipers for example. So when you deal with them, it's not a constant struggle for survival, like for example when you fight a proc build, or when you fight a Dragon Knight or a Bowsorc. But you do need to constantly watch out and stay on your toes for their combos, otherwise you risk getting two-shot by them. Their main combo relies on Incapacitating Strike and then Merciless Resolve right after. Incap is a very cheap ultimate that gives a damage increase and a stun, and that goes really nicely with the super hard hitting Merciless Resolve. While you are stunned and have a damage increase on you, that Merciless can crit to 20 or 25k depending from player to player. So that's immediately also the combo that you need to look out for the most, because most Nightblades are going to be using that over and over. The counter to that is to firstly be aware when the Nightblade has an incap, when he has used it recently and when not. So you can prepare for that accordingly by, if you're for example a Mastersorc, having a shield up, or by casting all your buffs and getting your health up, or by simply doing a roll dodge when you think it's incoming. The second way to counter that is when it actually happens and the incap hits you and you get stunned. It is very important that you are good at animation cancelling the break free into a roll dodge, or a shield into a roll dodge, or a heal into a roll dodge. That's because a lot of the damage that the Nightblade deals is undodgeable, and that includes Merciless Resolve. So if you get hit by an incap and you are alert and you're able to immediately break free and roll dodge, you have a large chance of avoiding the Merciless Resolve altogether. If you are not fast enough with this, or you don't have many buffs up, there's a large chance you are going to simply die from these two hits and maybe something like an execute or a power extraction afterwards. Now, good Nightblades are also going to use the off balance proc that Concealed Weapon does with a heavy attack to CC you as well. This is what they do if they know that you are able to deal with an incap into Merciless Resolve combo by just breaking free and roll dodging the Merciless, or when they just want to have another combo when they don't have incap up just yet. So next to tracking their incap, it is also important to track what's the state of off balance on you. Do they have it active on you? Have they recently activated it on you? Do they have a Merciless Resolve ready to cast at you if they haven't casted it in a while? Because if that happens, then what the Nightblade is going to do is a partly charged heavy attack when you don't see it coming, and then a Merciless Resolve right after. That Merciless Resolve is going to hit less hard because it doesn't have the debuff from incap, but it's also a lot more difficult to avoid. So in this case, really what you have to do is prepare for that. Be proactive in how you're going to deal with this. If you're a Mastersorc, again, cast a shield, make sure your buffs are up. Now when the Nightblade wants to be really unpredictable and hit a high amount of burst, what they're going to do is make sure that they have incapped you and you have the debuff on you. And since that debuff now lasts a really long time, they have a long time to then do an off-balance CC, let's say 5 or 10 seconds later with a Merciless Resolve afterwards. So that can happen too. And that is also something when you have a fight that lasts longer versus a Nightblade that they might attempt against you and that you need to be aware of. Again, the answer here is to break free and roll dodge after the incap, just in case that they want to cast the Merciless right after, and be aware of what the status of balance on you, whether you can get CC'd by them or not. There's also some Nightblades that will use Fear to CC you before casting a Merciless Resolve or something else. Now this is not as much of an issue as the off-balance CC to deal with, because there the story is again where you just want to break free and roll dodge to dodge the Merciless. After you do that roll dodge, just like any other time, you want to make sure your defenses are good, you have a shield or a heal up and running, and your buffs are good too. Now when it comes to this positioning play, something that Nightblade will often do is go into Cloak, for example after a roll dodge while on the bow bar if it's a roll in Nightblade, and then they'll run towards you. You can see that coming because they often do that roll dodge towards you, or they cloak as they are already moving towards you, which means that you can see them disappear while having a momentum towards you. What the Nightblade wants to do then is go either to your side or behind you and then hit you with a heavy attack and an incap. That's a very common combo for Nightblade. The incap can be followed by just a concealed weapon or a merciless resolve. But the idea is that you know that this is coming because you have seen the Nightblade do this. So in that case too, if the Nightblade cloaks and moves towards you, you should be proactive with your defense. Cast a shield, cast a buff. You can even try and blocking and roll dodging right when you think the Nightblade is going to deal his burst, which is what more experienced players are going to try and do as well. That's the basics for when it comes to melee Nightblades offense. When it comes to sniper Nightblades, so those that just stand at maximum range and spam snipe on you, I've already talked about that in a previous video which you can see linked here. But basically, if you cannot get to the Nightblade and the Nightblade is able to stay in range while spamming snipe on you, you have to get out of the situation because it's the highest range damage spam there is in the game, and you have to use something like roll dodging and heals, or you have to go into line of sight to try and avoid all this damage. Otherwise there's a large chance you're not going to be able to deal with it, especially if you are in a situation where you are outnumbered. Using LOS and things like that can also tempt the sniper to come closer to you, to still be able to do damage to you, and that's also where you can come out of LOS and do a sudden burst with, for example, Overload if you're on a Master Sword, or with Dawnbreaker on any other class, things like that. You can also go towards the Nightblade as he's spamming snipe on you, while roll cancelling either defensive or offensive abilities to dodge all his damage and also heal yourself up at the same time. When it comes to defense, the Nightblade class is actually a little squishy. It's not the same as, for example, an Arcanist, a Dragonite or a Warden that also has a lot of passive defense. If you see a Brawler Nightblade going around, they are often a little bit more squishy than those. But the thing is that they have a lot of strong healing to make up for that. With Healthy Offering, Refreshing Path, Vigor and things like that, there's a lot of healing ticks coming in all the time, and they can also have their health go from 50% or low to full in just one button press. So when it comes to playing Nightblade, an important part of this is also to make sure that all this healing has a good uptime, because if it is not, you can be quite squishy, take a lot of damage and die all of a sudden too. When it comes to gankers, or especially snipers and roller Nightblades, the roll dodging is also a very important part of their defense. Most of the damage in this game can be roll dodged, which means that it is a really good idea to do that of course, but there are ways to deal with people that spam this as well. One of the most obvious things from a Master Sword point of view is just keeping up Haunting Curse. If you are on the other class, you want to keep up all your dots, because all that will keep on ticking even through roll dodge as well. And that's also how you can keep up the pressure against the Nightblade. Undodgeable stuns are also really valuable here, things like Streak on a Master Sword, Shattering Rocks on a DK, Leap if you choose to use that, or Dawnbreaker on many classes are also good against this kind of build, because often while you are roll dodging you really want to avoid incoming damage. That counts for Nightblades as well. So if then you are able to bring them out of roll dodge by casting a stun on them, they might be in a tougher position. So it's important that if you have an attack like that, to be aware that when the Nightblade needs to survive and needs to roll dodge to survive, that you should think about using this to counter that. A last thing that is also done by more experienced players is trying and hitting the Nightblade with a dodgeable stun or any other kind of dodgeable attack right after they come out of roll dodge. Often there is a split second after a Nightblade comes out of the roll dodge before they have cast a skill or another roll dodge, where you can try and hit those abilities and still damage them anyway. On Sorcerer, a good example of that is trying to hit them with just a Crushing Shock or Crystal Fragments. A good example with that, if you're playing Nightblade yourself, is to use your own off-balance heavy attack. So if you have put the enemy Nightblade off-balance before and the enemy Nightblade comes out of roll dodge, you can try and time the hit of a heavy attack right when that happens, and then you can stun them unexpectedly and, for example, follow it up with a Merciless Resolve. I have to give a special mention here to Crushing Weapon, which is a spell that I often like using as well, not only because it deals a lot of damage and it gives Major Breach, but also because it kind of ignores Roll Dodge. And the reason I say that is because if you cast a light attack with the Crushing Weapon right afterwards and the Nightblade rolls that, you still keep the charge of the Crushing Weapon, which means that you can cast a light attack afterwards, it still has that charge, and if that light attack hits the enemy Nightblade as they come out of Roll Dodge, it will still proc that Crushing Weapon you casted before. If you follow that up with a Fragment right after, you can have a burst of the light attack, the Crushing Weapon and the Fragment hitting right at the same time when the Nightblade goes out of Roll Dodge, and that's a really strong counter to this kind of gameplay as well, and something that I really like Crushing Weapon for range builds specifically, so think about Marshall of course. A mythic that is sometimes used by Nightblades is Left-Hander's Aegis, which kind of negates all of this as well, because it gives you a shield instead of that dodging effect on the Roll Dodge, which means that you can not really stun them and deal a lot of damage to them unexpectedly, because the shield will just eat that all up. That's the reason why it's one of the good mythics to use on Nightblade as well. Then the last and maybe most common way of Nightblade defense is Cloak or Shadowy Disguise. There are some ways to counter that are equal to that with the Roll Dodge. So for example, I mentioned with the Roll Dodging you want to keep Haunting Curse up. The same counts for Cloak, because every 3.5 seconds the Nightblade will be pulled out of Cloak. There's other ways to do that as well. For example, Elemental Susceptibility will pull a Nightblade out of Cloak every 7.5 seconds, Structured Entropy will pull a Nightblade out of Cloak every 2 seconds, and Detection Potions obviously allow you to see a Nightblade all the time. So there is a lot of counters to Cloak here that I just listed that you can consider. Something like Elemental Susceptibility is very common of course, and every sorcerer has Haunting Curse. And Detection Potions is something I recommend for any kind of PvP build, to just have a quick slot for that. In case that your resources are fine and you don't need a Tri-Step Potion for example, if you normally use that, feel free to go to a Detection Potion to fight the Nightblade, because it will be a lot easier to deal with that, especially if the Nightblade relies on Cloak a lot, for example in the case of gankers. And then on the subject of gankers, to close this off with, the way gankers work is often the same way as any other kind of Nightblade that runs into you and goes into Cloak. They just want to deal a high amount of damage in a split second. I talked about the heavy attack into incap combo. That's something gankers will often do as well, and right after they can hit you with, for example, Merciless Resolve or Arterial Burst. So that's kind of the exact same combo as you see on many other Nightblade builds, and countering that works the exact same way as well. When it comes to the specific ranged kind of ganking build with Crushing Shock and Snipe that you see from time to time as well, there too the idea is that you need to be very quick with your animation cancelling. So breaking free into Roll Dodging that you might do after being hit by an incap is here replaced by casting a Haunt Ward or a heal and then Roll Dodging immediately afterwards to do an animation cancel. That is going to allow you to heal up and avoid all damage in the meantime as well, because again most Nightblade damage is dodgeable. So all in all, to sum this up, a lot of dealing with Nightblades depends on how well you know that a Nightblade works. If you know how it functions, there's a lot that can be predicted. Things like incaps, Merciless Resolve, them coming towards you, them being into trouble, is something you can see on a Nightblade. It helps defensively but also offensively, because if you know the Nightblade is struggling or is not on any kind of offensive move, you can also take a little bit more risk in trying to kill the Nightblade. In my opinion, that makes for exciting fights, especially if you fight against high damage Nightblades, and that's definitely something I can't say for every class in the game. In any case, I hope that this video has been useful. If you want to see more like that in other classes, let me know, and I thank you for watching.